The air in the grand auction hall crackled with an almost tangible excitement, a hushed reverence punctuated by the sharp, decisive taps of the auctioneer's gavel. Spotlighted on the velvet-draped stage was Luminous Ascent, a canvas steeped in history and vibrant with the brush strokes of a forgotten master. Bids flew across the opulent room like whispered secrets, each number higher than the last, pushing the price into the stratosphere. A collective gasp rippled through the impeccably dressed crowd as the final bid, a staggering $23 million, secured the masterpiece. The artwork, a symbol of extreme wealth and artistic triumph, was whisked away, destined for a private collection, its journey from a struggling artist's easel to this glittering pinnacle a testament to art's undeniable power, often tied irrevocably to fortune. Miles away, in a world utterly divorced from such gilded opulence, 16-year-old Ilara sat hunched over a tattered sketchbook, a stubby pencil clutched tight in her paint-stained fingers. The only sound in her small, cramped bedroom was the gentle scratching of graphite on paper, a stark contrast to the clamor of the auction. Her canvas was not a museum-worthy masterpiece, but a simple sheet of drawing paper. Her palette, not a spectrum of rare pigments, but the muted tones of a well-worn pencil. Yet, within those lines, a similar kind of magic unfolded. Ilara's focus was absolute, her brow furrowed in concentration as she meticulously rendered the delicate veins of a fallen leaf she'd found on her walk home, each curve and shadow imbued with a reverence rarely seen in someone so young. Her world was painted in shades of quiet observation and profound emotion, a secret universe she meticulously crafted, far from the critical gaze of sophisticated collectors. Ilara lived with her mother in a modest, slightly run-down house nestled on the outskirts of a quintessential American small town. Their home, while filled with love, was a constant reminder of their precarious financial situation. Her mother, a woman of immense strength and quiet dignity, spent her days toiling for the affluent Montgomery family, scrubbing floors, polishing silver, and managing their sprawling estate. The contrast between the Montgomerys' lavish lifestyle and their own humble existence was a stark, ever-present backdrop to Ilara's life. Her mother often returned home, her hands chapped, her back aching, but always with a gentle smile for Ilara, masking the weariness that clung to her like a second skin. Art was Ilara's solace, her refuge, her very breath. Since she was old enough to hold a crayon, she had been drawing, painting, creating. Her small room was testament to this unwavering passion, filled with stacks of sketchbooks, half-finished canvases propped against the walls, and the lingering scent of turpentine. But this passion, this undeniable talent, felt like a secret burden. Every stroke of her brush, every hour lost in the hypnotic world of creation, was tinged with a delicate guilt. She knew the sacrifices her mother made, the double shifts, the deferred dreams, all to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. In her mind, art was a luxury, a frivolous pursuit that they simply could not afford. It demanded time, materials, and a mental space free from worry, all commodities that were in painfully short supply. She often hid her finished pieces, tucking them away beneath her bed or at the bottom of her overflowing closet, like precious, forbidden treasures. The idea of investing in art supplies, of pursuing formal training, seemed an absurd extravagance when there were bills to pay and groceries to buy. Her mother, intuitive and observant, would sometimes find a hidden drawing, her eyes softening with a mixture of pride and unspoken sadness. She would praise Ilara's skill, her touch gentle as she traced a charcoal line, But the conversation would inevitably drift back to practical matters, to the realities of their daily struggle. Ilara understood. She loved her mother fiercely and bore the weight of their financial constraints deeply. Her dreams of art school, of dedicating her life to creation, felt distant and unattainable. A fantastical whisper in a world demanding harsh arithmetic. She yearned to contribute, to alleviate her mother's burdens, but how could a paintbrush or a canvas possibly compete with the tangible needs of their existence? This internal conflict was a constant companion, a silent battle waged between her artistic soul and her practical conscience. She yearned for resources, for the freedom to paint without the shadow of guilt, but saw no path forward. Her life was a symphony of quiet observation, capturing the beauty in the mundane, the play of light on a dusty windowpane, the intricate pattern of worn lace, the weary elegance in her mother's hands. These were her subjects, rendered with an honesty and depth that belied her age. She was an artist born of necessity and circumstance, her vision sharpened by the very limitations that threatened to smother it. The world beyond her small town, the world of multi-million-dollar paintings and celebrated artists, felt like a distant planet, beautiful but utterly unreachable. But sometimes, in the quiet solitude of her room, as the last rays of sunlight faded through her window, she would look at her latest creation, a small, vibrant world born from her own imagination, and a sliver of hope, stubborn and defiant, would flicker within her. She knew, deep down, that her art held power, a voice that longed to be heard. The question was, would anyone ever listen? Would the world beyond her humble walls ever see the magic she spun from simple pencil and paper? Subscribe to our channel if you love stories where overlooked talent finds its moment to shine. The opulent charity gala shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, a spectacle of wealth and curated taste. Mr. Montgomery, a man whose reputation for shrewd business dealings was only surpassed by his notoriously eccentric and often cruel pronouncements, stood on a raised platform. He was a collector of art, yes, but more keenly, a collector of status, viewing masterpieces not for their inherent beauty, but for their price tags and the prestige they conferred. His voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, cut through the polite murmurs of the elite crowd like a diamond cutting glass. He held a half-empty champagne flute, its contents swirling as he gestured expansively. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, a sardonic glint in his sharp eyes. "We are here tonight to celebrate art, and of course ourselves. But I often hear whispers, about struggling artists, about unrecognized genius languishing in obscurity. Bah, I say art finds its way, always. And to prove my point, or perhaps to mock the very notion, I propose a challenge. A grand, audacious challenge." A ripple of intrigued, slightly mocking laughter spread through the room. Mr. Montgomery savored the attention, a predator playing with his audience. "I say to you all," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "find me an artist, any artist, who can paint like Picasso. Not a mere imitation, mind you, but with that raw, untamed spirit, that revolutionary vision. Someone who can genuinely move me, who can capture that elusive spark of genius. And if they succeed, if they truly impress me, Hubert Montgomery, with a work of art worthy of the master himself, I will personally purchase a mansion for their mother." A mansion. Not a cottage, not a hovel, but a grand estate. Consider it my philanthropic jest, a testament to the power of art, or perhaps the ultimate exposé of its current mediocrity. He raised his glass dramatically, the light catching the expensive liquid, and took a theatrical sip. The pronouncement hung in the air, a mix of genuine astonishment and cynical amusement. It was a jibe indeed, a calculated insult delivered with the veneer of generosity, designed to inflame the art world and reinforce Mr. Montgomery's own self-importance. He enjoyed the power of his words, the way they would send ripples through the tightly knit circles of artists, critics, and gallerists. He viewed it as a grand social experiment, a public display of his own omnipotence, and a convenient way to dismiss the very idea of unknown talent as merely an excuse for lack of skill. To him, true genius was already recognized, already monetized, already hanging in his climate-controlled vaults. The news spread like wildfire, fanned by social media and art publications hungry for sensational headlines. Montgomery's Mansion Challenge became the talk of the town, then the nation. It attracted a flurry of established, often arrogant, aspiring artists. They saw it as a golden opportunity for publicity, a chance to reassert their dominance, or at least to rub shoulders with the infamous collector. Critics, ever eager for controversy, weighed in with pompous pronouncements, dissecting Mr. Montgomery's motives and debating the very definition of Picasso-esque. Most scoffed at the idea that any true talent would emerge from the woodwork, preferring to believe that all significant artists were already part of their exclusive club. Mr. Montgomery himself, the primary antagonist in this unfolding drama, thrived on the attention, reiterating his stringent criteria, his disdain for anything he perceived as amateurish, and his unwavering belief that only established names held any true artistic merit. He viewed art solely through the lens of monetary value and social status, dismissing heartfelt expression as sentimental weakness. Ilara, having finished her shift, was quietly tidying up the Montgomerys' sprawling kitchen, the sounds of the gala a distant, muffled hum. She paused, wiping down a marble counter, as fragments of Mrs. Montgomery's excited recounting of her husband's magnificent challenge drifted in from the adjacent dining room. Ilara's heart did a strange flutter. A mansion for a mother. The words echoed in her mind, a stark contrast to the small, cramped apartment she shared with her own mother. She initially dismissed it as a cruel joke, a rich man's folly. How could anyone possibly paint like Picasso on command, especially for someone so clearly intent on belittling rather than truly discovering talent? Her own art was about truth, about feeling, not about impersonation. The very idea felt sacrilegious to her personal artistic creed. Later that evening, back in their modest apartment, Ilara recounted the absurd challenge to her mother, her voice tinged with a mix of indignation and resignation. She expected her mother to laugh it off, to dismiss it as another example of the rich man's disconnectedness. But instead, her mother, who usually met such wealthy pronouncements with a weary sigh, simply listened, her gaze distant, thoughtful. "A mansion," her mother murmured, almost to herself, her fingers tracing the worn pattern on their kitchen table. Her eyes, usually clouded with the quiet anxieties of their daily struggles, held a glimmer, a fragile, almost imperceptible spark of hope. She knew Ilara's talent, had always known it, even when resources meant her daughter's canvases were recycled cardboard and her paints were cheap, diluted tubes. She had seen the raw emotion, the undeniable spark in every hidden sketch. "Don't be silly, Mama," Ilara said, trying to wave away the thought, a knot forming in her stomach. "He doesn't mean it. It's just Mr. Montgomery showing off. And besides, I don't paint like Picasso. My art is mine." She knew the weight of her mother's silent plea, the unspoken desire for comfort, for security, for a life free from the endless struggle. The potential life-changing prize, a mansion not for herself, but for her beloved mother, began to coalesce into a powerful, almost unbearable internal pressure. It wasn't about the grand gesture, but about the quiet dignity it could afford her mother. The thought burrowed deep, igniting a reluctant, fiery determination within Alara, even as her fear of public humiliation and her artistic integrity battled fiercely within her young heart. The art world, a vibrant tapestry woven with threads of celebrity, controversy, and colossal sums of money, now buzzed with the audacious challenge laid down by Mr. Montgomery. His words, "Paint like Picasso, and I'll buy your mother a mansion," had ricocheted through galleries, studios, and cocktail parties, sparking a wildfire of speculation and derision. Many scoffed, dismissing it as another eccentric billionaire's caprice, a thinly veiled stunt designed more for his own amusement than for the genuine discovery of talent. Yet, the sheer magnitude of the prize, a mansion, cast a shimmering allure, too potent to be entirely ignored. A surprising number of artists, some established names seeking publicity, others desperate hopefuls clinging to a sliver of opportunity, declared their intention to participate. The media, ever hungry for a spectacle, fanned the flames, transforming Mr. Montgomery's challenge into a public forum for artistic debate and social commentary. Meanwhile, in the quiet solitude of her small, dimly lit room, Alara wrestled with an internal storm. The mansion, a symbol of unimaginable security and comfort for her struggling mother, was a siren song, pulling her towards a dream she barely dared to acknowledge. Her mother's subtle, hopeful glances, her gentle sighs that spoke volumes of unspoken desire, were a constant, tender pressure. Alara knew, deep down, that her mother believed in her, in the magic that happened when her hand met canvas. This unwavering belief was the small, fragile seed from which her hesitant resolve began to sprout. Secretly, under the cloak of night, when the house was quiet and the world was asleep, Alara began to work. Her canvas was a repurposed bedsheet, stretched taut over a makeshift wooden frame she'd found discarded behind a hardware store. Her paints were a motley collection of student-grade tubes, some half-empty, others acquired through bartering or gifted by a kind art teacher years ago. Each stroke was a testament to resourcefulness, a silent act of defiance against their limited circumstances. Self-doubt, a shadow that had always loomed large over Alara's artistic aspirations, now swelled to monstrous proportions. Could her raw, untamed style, born from observation and emotion rather than formal training, possibly stand a chance? Her art was not about replication or homage. It was about translation, about taking the world she saw and felt and transmuting it onto the canvas with an almost visceral intensity. She poured her anxieties, her hopes, her fears for her mother's weary hands into her work, each brushstroke a confession, a prayer, a silent scream. She questioned whether her unique vision, so deeply personal and expressive, could ever be compared to the monumental legacy of Picasso, a titan whose name echoed through the annals of art history. Mr. Montgomery, a man who viewed art through the cold, calculating lens of market value and established reputation, seemed an impenetrable fortress. How could her humble, heartfelt creations impress someone so entrenched in the superficialities of the art world? The very thought was daunting, almost paralyzing. Her early artistic process was a chaotic dance between inspiration and desperation. She drew ideas from the humble surroundings of her small town, the way sunlight dappled through the worn curtains of their living room, the stoic beauty of a wilting flower in their tiny yard, the resilient spirit evident in the faces of her neighbors. A chipped teacup on her mother's kitchen table became a study in subtle geometry and melancholic reflection. The texture of peeling paint on an old fence provided inspiration for a study in abstract form. There was an intense, almost spiritual connection she forged with her work. Each piece was not merely an object, it was an extension of her soul, a fragment of her very being. She worked with an almost furious energy, her fingers smudged with paint, her hair often falling into her eyes, her mind completely consumed by the unfolding vision on the canvas. The silence of the night became her sanctuary, the only time she felt truly free to unleash the torrent of emotions that clamored for expression within her. Scavenged materials, old newspapers for sketches, leftover house paint for washes, even crushed berries for pigment, became instruments of her passion. She didn't just paint, she breathed life onto the canvas, imbuing every line and every shade with a raw, unfiltered emotion that was uniquely her own. There were moments of exhilarating clarity where the brush moved with an almost autonomous grace, and then there were stretches of agonizing struggle where the vision seemed to slip through her grasp like smoke. Yet, through it all, she persisted, driven by an unyielding desire to create, to speak through color and form, to honor the silent plea in her mother's eyes. She poured her heart into the canvas, unknowingly channeling the raw, untamed emotion that defined her art, an emotion that transcended technique and whispered profound truths. The relentless march of days brought the submission deadline into sharp focus, its imminent arrival casting a long, anxious shadow over Ilara's every waking moment. The pressure mounted with each passing hour, a relentless vice tightening around her burgeoning creativity. Maintaining the secrecy of her ambitious project became an increasingly arduous task, especially within the very household where her mother tirelessly toiled. Mr. Montgomery's sprawling estate felt like a labyrinth of watchful eyes, and Ilara lived in constant fear that her clandestine artistic endeavors would somehow be discovered, unraveling everything. She imagined hushed conversations, suspicious glances, and the inevitable, crushing judgment that would follow. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant voice, sent a jolt of panic through her, forcing her to quickly conceal her paints and canvases, her heart hammering against her ribs. The fear of disappointing her mother, of jeopardizing the fragile hope that had begun to bloom between them, was a powerful, almost paralyzing force. Meanwhile, the wider art world buzzed with the impending submissions for Mr. Montgomery's audacious challenge. Professional artists, cloistered in their grand, well-appointed studios, began to unveil their interpretations. These were often highly polished, meticulously executed pieces, academically correct in their homage to cubism or their abstract deconstruction of form, yet frequently lacking the spark of genuine emotion. They were predictable, precise, products of extensive training and established reputation. News reports and art critics, largely dismissive of the notion that an unknown could possibly contend with such luminaries, showcased these formidable entries, inadvertently amplifying Ilara's feelings of inadequacy. The prevailing narrative suggested that the winner would undoubtedly emerge from this elite circle, a familiar face delivering a sophisticated, albeit safe, rendition of Picasso's style. The art world, steeped in its hierarchies and traditions, was fundamentally dismissive of any dark horse, especially one as inconspicuous as Ilara. They sought conformity to an established aesthetic, a testament to skill within recognized parameters, rather than revolutionary spirit or raw, unbridled emotion. each glossy photograph of a competitor's finished piece, each glowing review of an established artist's Picasso-esque submission chipped away at Ilara's already fragile confidence. She saw their immaculate brushwork, their sophisticated palettes, their confident assertions of artistic lineage, and compared them to her own humble materials and intuitive approach. A profound wave of doubt washed over her, threatening to engulf her entire project. She spent an entire afternoon staring blankly at her almost finished canvas, the vibrant colors now seeming dull, the bold lines appearing hesitant, the sheer impossibility of her task, the perceived superiority of her competitors, and the seemingly insurmountable expectations of a man like Mr. Montgomery weighed her down. The mansion, the promised prize, suddenly felt like an unattainable mirage, a cruel trick of the light designed to highlight her own artistic insignificance. What was she thinking? How could she, a self-taught girl with scavenged materials, ever hope to compete against artists who had dedicated their lives to mastering their craft, artists whose works were already hanging in galleries? The gap between her reality and their polished existence felt like an unbridgeable chasm. She felt a profound weariness settle into her bones, the kind that saps all motivation and makes even the simplest act seem monumental. Overwhelmed, she found herself curled in her small bedroom, the canvas turned to the wall, her small paint-stained hands covering her face. A quiet sob escaped her, a sound of utter despair. It was then that her mother, ever observant, ever attuned to the subtle shifts in her daughter's moods, discovered her. Elena didn't speak a word, not at first. She simply sat on the edge of the bed, her presence a warm, comforting anchor in Ilara's storm. She gently reached out, her calloused hand, worn from years of scrubbing and polishing, resting lightly on Ilara's shaking shoulder. There was no need for grand speeches, no theatrical declarations of belief. Instead, Elena silently rose, walked over to the neglected painting, and with a reverence that spoke volumes, slowly turned it around. The canvas, vibrant with Ilara's raw emotion and unique perspective, now faced them. Elena's eyes, usually tired, sparkled with an unshed tear as she absorbed the richness of the colors, the intensity of the composition. She pointed to a particular swirl of blues and greens, a tumultuous sky that mirrored Ilara's inner turmoil, and then to a resilient, almost defiant splash of crimson that seemed to pulse with life, even amidst the chaos. Slowly, carefully, she traced the outline of a figure Ilara had imbued with a quiet strength, a figure that seemed to embody both their struggles and their enduring hope. Elena said nothing, but her touch, her gaze, her quiet appreciation spoke directly to Ilara's soul. It was a silent affirmation, a profound act of belief that cut through all the noise of external pressures and internal doubts. In that moment, Ilara didn't need words. Her mother's unwavering faith, expressed through that simple, supportive gesture, reignited a flicker of determination within her. The flame, though small, began to burn again, fueled by the purest form of love and acceptance. She looked at her mother, then back at the painting, and a renewed sense of purpose began to mend the cracks in her resolve. She wasn't painting for Mr. Montgomery, or for the art world, or even for Picasso's ghost. She was painting for herself, and for the silent, unwavering belief in the eyes of the woman who had nurtured her artistic spirit despite all odds. She would finish it. She had to. The submission deadline, a date that had loomed with such terrifying certainty, finally arrived, bringing with it a whirlwind of frantic last-minute touches and an almost unbearable tension. Ilara, with only her mother's quiet, steadfast support to bolster her spirits, carefully wrapped her completed painting. It felt impossibly fragile, yet overwhelmingly powerful in her hands, a culmination of countless sleepless nights and a lifetime of unspoken dreams. The act of packaging it felt deeply personal, like sending a piece of her soul out into a world she knew would be quick to judge. She chose a nondescript brown paper and twine, wanting the artwork to speak entirely for itself, unburdened by any external presentation. For the submission itself, Ilara opted for the utmost anonymity, a decision fueled by a mixture of shyness, a desire to avoid direct scrutiny from Mr. Montgomery's establishment, and a faint hope that her art might be judged purely on its merit, rather than on who she was or wasn't. She used a pseudonym, a simple, evocative name she pulled from the pages of an old poetry book she cherished. Aura. This small act of concealment was a shield against the potential for public humiliation and a way to protect her mother from any backlash should her entry be ridiculed. The submission process itself was fraught with an internal trembling she struggled to conceal. She navigated the anonymous drop-off point at the bustling art gallery with a racing heart, her eyes darting nervously around, half expecting to be recognized, half fearing that her work wouldn't even be noticed among the deluge of other entries. The assistant at the desk, a harried young woman, barely glanced up as Ilara placed her canvas on the counter, handing over the required forms without a word. It felt anticlimactic, almost mundane, for such a significant moment in her life. Yet, as she walked away, a strange mix of relief and poignant emptiness washed over her. Her painting was out there now, no longer hers alone, but floating in the vast, unpredictable ocean of the art world. The initial reactions to the submitted artworks were, for the most part, exactly as Ilara had anticipated. Weeks later, when the preliminary viewing began, the gallery buzzed with the murmur of critics, collectors, and other artists, all moving through the vast exhibition halls with an air of practiced discernment. Many of the submitted canvases were instantly dismissed, earning little more than a cursory glance and a dismissive scoff. These were the predictable entries, the ones that tried too hard to mimic Picasso's cubist lines or his blue period melancholia, lacking any genuine connection or originality. They were imitations, often technically proficient, but ultimately soulless reproductions. The art world, despite its occasional theatricality, has a keen eye for authenticity, and these pieces simply didn't have it. Ilara's piece, however, despite its anonymous submission and unassuming presentation, began to draw a different kind of attention. Tucked away in a corner, far from the grand spotlighted entries, it slowly but surely started to capture the gazes of those who ventured beyond the obvious. It was an anomaly, a splash of vibrant, almost unsettling honesty amidst the polite attempts at homage. Its unique style, deeply emotional and fiercely expressive, initially perplexed the discerning eyes of the judges. They had expected a clear, recognizable homage to Picasso, something that fit neatly into a predefined category. Ilara's painting, with its swirling colors and fragmented yet intensely personal imagery, offered no such easy categorization. Its lines were bold, but not cubist in the traditional sense. Its colors were potent, but not simply mimicking a famous period. It was abstract, yet deeply narrative, suggesting stories without explicitly telling them. Instead of directly copying Picasso, Ilara had channeled his spirit of innovation and emotional depth in a way that was entirely her own, creating a visual language that felt both ancient and startlingly modern. Mr. Montgomery, in his typical fashion, was among the first to scrutinize the submissions, though his approach was less about appreciation and more about validation of his own narrow artistic worldview. He strode through the gallery, a critical hawk surveying a flock of pigeons, his expression a practiced mask of superiority. When he arrived at Ilara's anonymous submission, he paused, his brow furrowing in a mixture of confusion and disdain. He scoffed, a short, sharp sound that carried just enough to be overheard by his entourage. "What is this?" he muttered, gesturing dismissively with a manicured hand. "Untrained. Unconventional. It's certainly not Picasso, not in any recognizable form." He spent less than a minute in front of it, his eyes scanning for the familiar angularity or the distinctive color palettes he associated with the master. Finding none, he deemed it too unconventional, too far removed from his preconceived notions of what the challenge demanded. He quickly moved on, his attention drawn to the more predictable entries, the ones that had attempted a direct, albeit superficial, emulation of Picasso's style. He reiterated his expectation, loudly enough for those around him to hear, that he was looking for a Picasso style, something familiar and grand, something that displayed technical mastery within established parameters. He was still very much trapped in his own definition of art, valuing only that which conformed to his established tastes and the market's current trends. The raw, untamed spirit of Ilara's work was, to him, merely an unfortunate deviation, an amateur's folly. He never even entertained the notion that true mastery could lie in breaking from convention rather than adhering to it. He was blind, at least for now, to the quiet power emanating from the canvas before him. He simply continued his rounds, confident in his own judgment, unaware that the very piece he dismissed held the potential to shatter his carefully constructed world. The quiet hum of hushed conversations gradually turned into a buzz, then a crescendo, despite Mr. Montgomery's initial, almost dismissive reaction to Ilara's submitted artwork. He had, with characteristic certainty, relegated it to the category of unconventional, therefore inferior, focusing instead on the more predictable entries that, at first glance, seemed to ape Picasso's cubist forms or blue period melancholy more directly. Yet, something about the anonymous piece, devoid of a clear name or an established artistic lineage, began to stir an unexpected fascination among a specific segment of the art world. A few influential art critics, known for their discerning eyes and willingness to challenge conventional wisdom, found themselves lingering longer before its canvas. They saw beyond the surface, beyond the initial shock of its departure from expected norms. There was a raw, visceral quality to Ilara's painting, an undeniable emotional resonance that pulled at something deep within them. It wasn't merely a painting. It felt like a confession, a silent scream, a whispered dream. The critics, usually jaded by years of predictable exhibitions, felt a genuine intellectual curiosity piqued, an almost primal urge to understand the mind behind such audacious strokes. These open-minded members of the judging panel, a small but significant minority amidst the more traditionalist voices, were equally intrigued. They argued with increasing fervor that the challenge wasn't just about mimicry, but about capturing a spirit, an essence. They debated passionately, their voices rising above the politely murmured agreements surrounding the more conventional submissions. Picasso wasn't just a style. One renowned art historian on the panel, Dr. Eleanor Vance, asserted, her voice cutting through the polite chatter. He was a revolution. He broke rules. He expressed raw emotion. To demand a stylistic imitation is to miss the point entirely. Another critic, a young firebrand named Marcus Thorne, known for his unconventional takes, nodded in agreement. This piece, he gestured towards Ilara's painting, its colors subtly gleaming under the gallery lights, doesn't imitate Picasso's form, but it echoes his audacity. It challenges, it provokes, it refuses to be categorized. Isn't that more Picasso-esque than any clever cubist pastiche? Heated discussions soon erupted within the judging panel, transforming what was meant to be a straightforward selection process into an intellectual battleground. Some of the long-standing art world figures, those who subscribed strictly to the established canons, vehemently argued that Ilara's painting simply did not fit the Picasso-esque theme Mr. Montgomery had explicitly, if somewhat carelessly, laid out. They pointed to its lack of overt cubist deconstruction, its absence of a clear blue or rose period stylistic signature. "Where is the geometric fragmentation?" one judge huffed, adjusting his spectacles. "Where is the direct influence of Guernica or Les Demoiselles d'Avignon? This is something else entirely. Beautiful, perhaps, but not what we asked for." However, the dissenting voices, primarily Dr. Vance and Marcus Thorne, countered with compelling arguments. They contended that the painting's emotional depth, its unique perspective, and its raw, unfiltered expression fulfilled the spirit of the challenge in an altogether unexpected and arguably more profound way. Picasso didn't just paint what he saw, Dr. Vance elucidated with academic precision. He painted what he felt, what he knew to be true beyond superficial appearances. He stripped away the veneer of reality to reveal deeper truths. This anonymous artist has done precisely that, albeit through a different visual language. The challenge was paint like Picasso, not paint Yeo Picasso. There's a crucial distinction. Thorne added, "It's about the soul of the artist, the courage to innovate, the refusal to be bound by convention. This piece screams that courage." The debate raged, fueled by genuine intellectual curiosity and the inherent power of the artwork itself, which seemed to resist easy classification and demanded deeper engagement. As news of the ongoing debates and the peculiar, highly unconventional artwork began to leak beyond the cloistered walls of the judging chamber, public interest inevitably peaked. Initial whispers turned into murmurs, then into widespread discussions across various art forums, social media platforms, and even mainstream news outlets. The tabloids, sensing a story, dubbed it the mystery masterpiece, or the Picasso puzzle. People started to discuss the mystery painting, wondering who the unknown artist could possibly be. Art blogs were rife with speculation, dissecting blurry photographs and partial descriptions of the piece. Comment sections overflowed with theories. Was it an established artist using a pseudonym to test the waters? A reclusive genius? An art school prodigy? The sheer audacity of an artwork that defied easy labeling and yet captivated those who genuinely understood the nuances of artistic expression only added to its allure. The painting became a phenomenon, a subject of fascination and heated discussion, even among those who typically remained aloof from the art world. Everyone, it seemed, had an opinion on the anonymous submission, its unconventional beauty, and its challenge to the very definition of Picasso-esque. Mr. Montgomery, initially dismissive, found himself increasingly annoyed by the persistent buzz surrounding the piece he had so readily overlooked. He scoffed publicly, declaring it a distraction, an irrelevant tangent from the true purpose of his challenge. Yet, privately, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, he had missed something. The fervent passion of Dr. Vance and Marcus Thorne, typically dismissed as intellectual theatrics, now held a strange weight. The very public clamor for this mystery painting was undeniable, a force that even his considerable influence could not entirely suppress. The stage was being set, not for a predictable coronation, but for an astonishing revelation, a moment that would force everyone, especially Mr. Montgomery, to confront their preconceived notions about art, talent, and the quiet power of an unknown artist. The painting, an intensely personal expression of Ilara's soul, had, against all odds, begun to carve out its own space in the public consciousness, silently demanding recognition. The air in the grand ballroom, where the final judging and announcement were to take place, crackled with an almost unbearable tension. Reporters jostled for position, camera flashes punctuated the expectant hush, and the elite of the art world whispered theories amongst themselves. Mr. Montgomery, resplendent in a tailored suit, stood poised at the podium, a rehearsed, almost self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. He held a sealed envelope, presumably containing the name of the winner, one of the predictable, academically approved artists whose submissions had so closely mimicked Picasso's superficial style. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified throughout the opulent space, and the whispers died down to a reverent silence. This was his moment, the culmination of his challenge, designed to reinforce his discerning eye and the unimpeachable standards he upheld in the art world. He was about to pronounce judgment, to crown his chosen successor to the Picasso throne, effectively dismissing the widespread clamor over the mystery painting as mere public sensationalism. Just as his hand moved to tear open the envelope, a figure emerged from the quiet corner of the judging panel, a woman whose name alone commanded respect, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a preeminent art historian whose scholarly works had redefined entire movements. Her presence was unexpected. She had remained largely silent throughout the public deliberations, observing keenly. The room collectively held its breath as Dr. Reed, with an air of understated authority, approached a large, shrouded canvas that had been centrally positioned. Her gaze swept over the expectant faces, finally resting on Mr. Montgomery, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Mr. Montgomery," she began, her voice clear and resonant, "before you reveal your selection, I believe there is an artist whose work demands not just recognition, but profound understanding." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mr. Montgomery's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance and surprise. He had not anticipated this intervention, especially not from Dr. Reed, known for her meticulous objectivity. Dr. Reed, undeterred, turned towards the shrouded canvas. Many have spent weeks debating whether an artwork could truly paint like Picasso by merely imitating his brushstrokes or cubist forms. But to paint like Picasso, she paused, her eyes gleaming with conviction, is not about replication. It is about revolution. It is about seeing the world anew, stripping away artifice, and exposing the raw, unfiltered truth of the human spirit. With a dramatic flourish, she pulled away the dark velvet cloth. There it was, Ilara's painting. It was an explosion of color and emotion, not a cubist landscape or a blue period portrait, but an abstract, deeply personal narrative. Swirls of vibrant blues and greens intertwined with muted grays and browns, forming a landscape of the soul. At its heart, a single, elongated figure, almost ethereal, reached upwards, its form both fragile and determined. The figure's face, though not clearly defined, conveyed an immense sense of longing and hope. It wasn't Picasso. It was something else entirely, something profoundly original. Yet it resonated with the same primal force that characterized Picasso's most impactful works. This piece, Dr. Reed continued, gesturing to the canvas, does not mimic Picasso's style. It embodies his spirit. Where Picasso broke down forms to reveal multiple perspectives, This artist breaks down emotional barriers. It is a work of immense courage, vulnerability, and authenticity. It defies categorization, just as Picasso defied the art world of his time. She paused, allowing the painting to speak for itself. The room was utterly silent, captivated by the artwork's raw power. The true challenge, she stated, her voice rising with passion, was never to copy, but to innovate, to create something so uniquely powerful that it shifts our perception. This painting achieves precisely that. Dr. Reed then revealed its simple yet profound title, Mother's Horizon. The significance of the title hung in the air, a whisper of a universal truth. It spoke of hope, of dreams deferred and dreams pursued, of the endless possibilities that a mother's love could inspire. It was a title that resonated not with artistic jargon, but with the deepest human emotions. Mother's Horizon, she repeated softly, encapsulates the very essence of human struggle and aspiration, reflecting the depth of feeling that Picasso channeled into his Guernica or his poignant Blue Period works. Mr. Montgomery, who had initially bristled at the interruption, now found himself staring at the painting, truly seeing it for the first time. The art historian's words had provided a new lens, stripping away his preconceived notions and forcing him to confront the artwork purely on its own terms. He saw not a deviation from his challenge, but a radical fulfillment of its true, unspoken intent. The vibrant blues and greens now seemed to pulse with a quiet strength, the reaching figure embodying not just Ilara's spirit, but perhaps even his own suppressed dreams of artistic purity. A tremor went through him, a sensation entirely foreign to his carefully constructed persona. The painting wasn't just beautiful, it was profoundly moving. It stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't felt in years, perhaps decades. His jaw noticeably slackened, his eyes, usually cold and calculating, now held a glimmer of genuine wonder, even a hint of unshed moisture. The self-satisfied smirk was entirely gone, replaced by a look of bewildered, almost childlike astonishment. He had been so utterly and completely wrong. The art world witnessed a rare and astonishing sight. Mr. Montgomery, the formidable art collector, visibly moved, his facade of dismissive arrogance crumbling before their very eyes. He slowly, almost reverently, stepped toward the painting, a silent acknowledgement of its unparalleled power and the profound truth it held within its vibrant, emotional brushstrokes. His silence spoke louder than any words, a stark admission of his error, and the dawning of an unexpected, profound artistic recognition. The weight of his own misjudgment settled heavily upon him, yet it was tempered by the undeniable beauty and raw genius of Mother's Horizon. The moment of reckoning had arrived, a hush falling over the grand hall as Mr. Montgomery strode to the podium, his face a mask of practiced composure. He held in his hands the sealed envelope containing the winner's name, the weight of expectation palpable. The stage was brightly lit, a single easel draped in velvet standing beside him, ready to reveal the victorious artwork. He cleared his throat, his gaze sweeping across the faces of artists, critics, and philanthropists, all eager for the conclusion of his audacious challenge. He began with a perfunctory nod to the numerous submissions, acknowledging the effort, but his voice lacked its usual condescending edge. He spoke of the criteria, the search for true artistic reflection, the spirit of Picasso. Yet the air was thick with anticipation, not for the predictable winner he had initially championed, but for the mystery masterpiece that had captured public imagination and divided his own judging panel. Just as he reached the crescendo of his speech, poised to announce a name that everyone expected to be one of the established contenders, a figure emerged from the wings. It was Dr. Vance, the renowned art historian, his presence commanding immediate respect. He walked with a quiet authority that cut through the tension, stepping beside Mr. Montgomery. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mr. Montgomery, momentarily flustered, inclined his head, allowing Dr. Vance to take the microphone. Dr. Vance's voice, calm and resonant, filled the hall. Mr. Montgomery's challenge was to paint like Picasso. For too long, we have conflated painting like Picasso with mere imitation, a stylistic resemblance. But Picasso's true genius lay not in a specific brushstroke, but in his relentless pursuit of truth, his courage to shatter conventions, to reveal the raw, unvarnished emotion of the human condition. He didn't just paint what he saw, he painted what he felt, what he knew to be true beyond superficial appearances. He stripped away the veneer of reality to reveal deeper truths. This anonymous artist has done precisely that, albeit through a different visual language. The challenge was, paint like Picasso, not paint a Picasso. There's a crucial distinction, he continued, his words weaving a compelling narrative around the artwork. This piece, Dr. Vance gestured towards the draped easel, screams courage. It speaks of struggle, of resilience, of an indomitable spirit that finds beauty in the unseen, power in vulnerability. It is a dialogue with the soul, a profound exploration of human experience that transcends technique and style. It is, in its purest form, Picasso's spirit reborn, not as a copy, but as an echo in a new voice. Then, with a dramatic pause, he announced the painting's title, a title previously known only to Ilara and her mother. The Weight of a Mother's Hope. The words hung in the air, a revelation that resonated deeply. Mr. Montgomery, initially resistant, his face a battleground of shock and growing understanding, stared at the easel. He had scoffed at its unconventional nature, dismissed its raw emotionality. But now, through Dr. Vance's eloquent interpretation and the haunting title, a new lens was placed before his eyes. He saw not a deviation, but an evolution. He looked again, truly looked, at the essence of the work that had caused such a stir. He saw the subtle hints of resilience, the quiet strength that had been painted with such authenticity. It bypassed his intellectual defenses and struck him at a visceral level. The colors, once seemingly discordant, now sang with a poignant melody. The textured layers, once dismissed as crude, now spoke of lived experience, of hands that toiled and dreams that soared despite limitations. He was visibly moved, a rare, almost unprecedented sight for the notoriously stoic collector. His eyes, usually sharp with critical assessment, softened, a flicker of genuine awe replacing his usual disdain. He understood, finally, the true value and power of Ilara's unique vision. With an almost imperceptible nod to Dr. Vance, Mr. Montgomery took the microphone again, his voice now devoid of its previous cynicism, imbued instead with a profound humility. "I confess," he began, his gaze sweeping the room. "I was wrong. My criteria were too narrow, my vision obscured by preconceived notions of what art should be. This challenge was meant to find genius, and genius, I have learned, rarely conforms to expectations." He paused, his eyes fixed on the shrouded canvas. The true spirit of Picasso lies in breaking molds, in fearless expression. And tonight, we have witnessed that spirit. The winner of this challenge, the artist who has painted with the heart and soul of a true visionary, is the creator of The Weight of a Mother's Hope. With a flourish, he drew back the velvet shroud, revealing Ilara's masterpiece in all its glory. Silence descended, then a gasp, followed by a rising tide of applause. "I promised to buy the mother of the winning artist a mansion," Mr. Montgomery continued, his voice ringing with newfound conviction. "And that promise I will honor with sincere admiration for the talent this incredible artwork represents." He then extended his hand, beckoning towards the back of the hall. "Will the artist please step forward?" A nervous tremor went through the crowd, and then, slowly, Ilara, pale but resolute, emerged from the shadows, her mother, Isabella, walking proudly beside her. A ripple of whispers, then a roar of astonished gasps, swept through the hall. The maid's daughter, the girl who had sketching in secret the quiet observer. Ilara, the artist. Isabella beamed, her eyes moist with uncontainable pride, her hand gently resting on Ilara's shoulder. Ilara stepped onto the stage, the spotlight finding her, her artwork a powerful, silent testament beside her. The mansion, once an unimaginable fantasy, was now a tangible reality, a symbol not just of wealth but of freedom, of validation, and the profound power of art to transform lives. It was an affirmation that her unique journey, her emotional wellspring, had not only found its voice but had moved a hardened soul like Mr. Montgomery. Her art, once hidden away in scraps of paper, now stood tall, inspiring, a beacon of hope for every overlooked talent. She knew this newfound recognition wasn't for fame, but for the opportunity it presented, for the security it offered her mother, and for the boundless possibilities it opened for her own artistic path. The world, once indifferent, now awaited her next masterpiece. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to believe in their dreams. What do you think Ilara paints next? Let us know in the comments, and don't miss our next story of triumph over adversity.